The most prestigious institution. The Galactic Institute of Advanced Sciences occupied an entire moon orbiting the capital world of the consortium. For 3,000 years, it had been the galaxy's premier center of learning, producing the greatest scientists, philosophers, and innovators known to civilization. Admission was nearly impossible. Of the millions who applied each cycle, fewer than 1,000 were accepted. Professor Vex Thalen, chair of the Admissions Council, reviewed applications with the same meticulous attention he'd applied for 6 centuries. His species, the Chiral, were known for their logical minds and attention to detail. He took pride in selecting only the most promising candidates. The holographic display before him showed the latest batch of applications. Candidates from 200 species, each one demonstrating exceptional aptitude in mathematics, physics, or theoretical sciences. Standard brilliance, he thought with satisfaction. Then he reached the human applications. Vex Thalen paused. Humans had joined the galactic community only 70 years ago. They were young, enthusiastic, and, by the standards of ancient species, hopelessly naive. Their technology was centuries behind the leading civilizations. Their scientific achievements, while respectable for their age, were nothing remarkable. Yet humans applied to the institute in droves. Every cycle, thousands of human applications flooded in. And every cycle, Vex Thalen rejected them all. Not again, he muttered, reviewing the first human application. The candidate's name was Dr. Maya Patel, Ph.D. in something called creative astrophysics. Creative astrophysics? Vex Thalen's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. Astrophysics was a rigorous mathematical discipline. There was nothing creative about it. You either calculated correctly or you didn't. He scanned her academic record. She had attended something called Stanford University on Earth. Her grades were excellent by human standards, but her research papers made Vex Thalen's head hurt. Instead of traditional mathematical proofs, she included things like thought experiments, imaginative scenarios, and what-if questions. One paper was titled, "If Dark Matter Could Think, What Would It Dream About?" Vex Thalen closed the application with a gesture of dismissal. Rejected. Humans clearly didn't understand serious science. He moved to the next human application. Dr. James Chen, with a degree in philosophical engineering. Philosophical engineering? That wasn't even a real field. Engineering was practical. Philosophy was abstract. They couldn't be combined. Rejected. The pattern continued. Artistic mathematics. Emotional robotics. Intuitive quantum mechanics. Every human applicant seemed determined to mix disciplines that should remain separate, to inject creativity into fields that required only logical precision. By the time Vex Thalen finished reviewing all 2,000 human applications, he had rejected every single one. As he had for the past 70 years. The angry ambassador. 2 weeks later, Vex Thalen received a very different kind of visitor. Ambassador Sarah Kim, Earth's representative to the consortium, arrived at his office without an appointment. Her species' habit of ignoring protocol was well documented. "Professor Vex Thalen," she said, sitting in his guest chair without being invited. "We need to talk about your admissions policies." Vex Thalen's scales rippled with irritation. "Ambassador, the Institute's admission standards are not subject to political influence." "I'm not asking for political favors," Sarah replied calmly. "I'm asking why you've rejected every human applicant for 70 years. That's 2,000 applications this cycle alone. Not one was even interviewed." "Because not one met our standards," Vex Thalen said flatly. "Humans treat science like art. You mix disciplines that should remain pure. You ask questions that have no mathematical basis. You pursue knowledge in ways that are fundamentally unscientific." Sarah leaned forward. "Or maybe we pursue knowledge in ways you've never considered. Professor, when was the last time the Institute made a genuine breakthrough? Not an incremental improvement, but a real paradigm shift?" Vex Thalen's expression became cold. "We make steady progress." That is the nature of serious science. Steady progress, Sarah repeated. The same steady progress for 3,000 years. Meanwhile, humanity went from splitting the atom to faster-than-light travel in 3 centuries. We did it by thinking differently. You did it recklessly, Vex Thalen corrected. Human science is chaotic, undisciplined, driven by emotion rather than logic. And yet it works. Does it? Vex Thalen pulled up galactic scientific rankings. Your species ranks 247th in mathematical precision, 189th in theoretical physics, 312th in computational sciences. By every objective measure, human science is mediocre. Sarah smiled. Now show me the rankings for innovation. Vex Thalen hesitated. He pulled up a different dataset, and his 4 eyes widened slightly. In the past 70 years, humanity had filed more patents than species 5 times older. They'd discovered 17 new principles of physics that the Institute had dismissed as impossible. They'd invented technologies that serious scientists said violated fundamental laws. Anomalies, Vex Thalen said. Lucky guesses. For 70 years? What exactly do you want, Ambassador? Sarah stood. I want you to accept 1 human student. Just 1. Let them attend for a single academic year. If they fail, I'll never bother you again. But if they succeed, if they show that human approaches have value, you agree to evaluate future human applications fairly. Vex Thalen considered this. 1 human student couldn't possibly disrupt the Institute's 3,000-year tradition. And if the experiment failed, he'd finally have proof that human methods were inferior. Very well, he said. Send me your best candidate. But they will be judged by our standards, not human ones. 1 mistake, 1 failure, and they're dismissed. Agreed, Sarah said, extending her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Vex Thalen took it, wondering what he'd just agreed to. The impossible student. The human who arrived 3 months later was not what Vex Thalen expected. Dr. Marcus Webb was young by galactic standards, barely 40 years old, with messy brown hair and an infectious enthusiasm that grated on Vex Thalen's nerves. Professor Vex Thalen. Marcus said, shaking the alien's hand vigorously. I'm so honored to be here. I've read all your papers on quantum field harmonics. Brilliant work, truly brilliant. Thank you, Vex Thalen said stiffly. Now, let me be clear about expectations. You will attend advanced theoretical physics seminars with students who have studied for decades. You will complete assignments to the Institute standards. You will not receive special treatment. Wouldn't want it any other way, Marcus replied cheerfully. The first seminar was multidimensional calculus, taught by Professor Zeltherix, a being whose species had evolved mathematical thinking as a biological trait. The equations she presented were so complex that most students took days to solve them. Marcus raised his hand. Yes? Zeltherix said, surprised that the human had a question so quickly. What if we approached this from a different angle? Marcus asked. Instead of calculating every dimensional interaction individually, what if we treated the whole system as a song? The room fell silent. A song? Zeltherix repeated. Yeah, like each dimension is a note, and we're looking for the harmony. When you play music, you don't calculate every sound wave interaction, you feel what sounds right. What if math works the same way at this scale? Mathematics is not music, Zeltherix said coldly. It is precise, logical, calculable. But music is based on mathematical ratios, Marcus countered. Harmonics, frequencies, patterns. What if high-dimensional math is just music in a language we haven't learned to hear yet? Vex Thalen watched from the back of the room, ready to see his experiment fail immediately. Marcus's approach was ridiculous. You couldn't feel your way through advanced mathematics. Except Marcus solved the problem in 20 minutes. He didn't show traditional work. Instead, he drew patterns, made analogies to music, and arrived at an answer that was verifiably correct. Lucky guess, Zeltherix muttered. But it wasn't. Over the following weeks, Marcus continued to solve complex problems using methods that made no logical sense. He compared quantum mechanics to jazz improvisation. He explained relativistic physics using metaphors from cooking. He treated the most serious scientific problems like puzzles to be played with rather than equations to be endured. And he was always right. The breakthrough. The turning point came during a special seminar on the Corlax paradox, a theoretical problem that had stumped the galaxy's best minds for 800 years. It involved a mathematical contradiction in faster-than-light travel that seemed to prove such travel was impossible. The fact that FTL travel clearly worked meant something was wrong with the math, but no one could figure out what. Professor Beck-Thalen himself led the seminar. For 3 hours, he presented every attempted solution, explaining why each one failed. The students listened in respectful silence, understanding they were witnessing one of the great unsolved mysteries of modern science. Marcus raised his hand. "Dr. Webb, this is not a time for creative metaphors," Beck-Thalen said tiredly. "This is a rigorous mathematical problem." "I know," Marcus said. "But I think the problem is that we're asking the wrong question." "The wrong question?" Beck-Thalen's scales rippled with irritation. "The paradox is clearly defined." "Right, but what if the universe doesn't work the way our math assumes it does? What if we're using the wrong kind of math entirely?" "There is only one kind of mathematics," another student objected. "Universal and absolute." "Is there?" Marcus stood and walked to the display board. "On Earth, we had a guy named Kurt Gödel who proved that any mathematical system complex enough to be useful will always contain statements that are true but unprovable within that system. What if the Corlax paradox is one of those statements? What if you can't solve it using traditional math because the solution exists outside the system you're using?" Beck-Thalen stared at him. "You're suggesting we need new mathematics?" "I'm suggesting we need to think about math differently. Not as something absolute and unchanging, but as a tool we invented. And when a tool doesn't work, you don't keep hitting the same nail harder. You get a different tool." The room erupted in argument. Students shouted about the absurdity of different mathematics. Professors defended the universal nature of mathematical truth. But Beck-Thalen sat quietly, his mind racing. What if the human was right? What if 3,000 years of steady progress had made the Institute so committed to traditional methods that they'd stopped questioning their own foundations? "Dr. Webb," Beck-Thalen said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Develop your theory. Show us this different mathematics. You have 6 months." Marcus grinned. "I'll need help. Can I work with anyone who's interested? If anyone is foolish enough to join you, they're welcome to." By the next day, half the Institute's students had volunteered. The Revolution, 1,300 words. The Human Method. Marcus Webb's laboratory became the most unusual space in the Institute's 3,000-year history. Instead of the quiet, orderly research facilities typical of serious science, his lab looked like organized chaos. Students from dozens of species crowded around holographic displays, arguing loudly. Music played in the background. Marcus insisted it helped him think. Art covered the walls, paintings, sculptures, diagrams that were more aesthetic than informative. There was even a coffee machine, which Marcus claimed was essential for human cognition. Professor Beck-Thalen visited weekly, watching with a mixture of fascination and horror as Marcus violated every principle of proper scientific methodology. "Dr. Webb," Beck-Thalen said during one visit. "Why are your students playing games?" Marcus looked up from where he was teaching 3 Kirill students to play chess. "Because games teach pattern recognition. Chess is basically applied mathematics. You're calculating moves, predicting outcomes, adapting strategy. Plus, it's fun, and fun makes people think better. Science is not supposed to be fun." "Why not?" Marcus challenged. "Who decided that learning had to be boring?" Beck-Thalen had no answer. In 3,000 years of Institute history, no one had asked that question. The research progressed in ways that defied traditional scientific method. Marcus encouraged his students to make wild guesses, then test them. He asked what-if questions that had no basis in existing theory. He combined concepts from completely unrelated fields, poetry and quantum mechanics, dance and orbital dynamics, cooking and thermodynamics. Everything connects to everything, Marcus explained to a bewildered Vexthalon. Humans learned that early. We didn't have the luxury of specialization when we were still figuring out science. Our physicists had to know philosophy. Our engineers had to understand art. We built our entire scientific tradition on the idea that creativity and logic aren't opposites, they're partners. That's madness, Vexthalon said. Is it? You've been doing science the correct way for 3,000 years. How many fundamental breakthroughs have you made in that time? Vexthalon's silence was answer enough. The discovery. 5 months into Marcus's research, he called an emergency meeting of the entire institute faculty. Every professor attended, curious about what the human had discovered, or expecting to witness his failure. Marcus stood before them, looking tired but excited. We did it. We found a solution to the Corlax paradox. The room erupted in skeptical murmurs. Impossible, someone said. The greatest minds have tried for centuries. That's the problem, Marcus replied. You've been trying the same way for centuries. We tried differently. He activated a holographic display showing complex mathematical structures. But these weren't like any mathematics the professors had seen before. The equations seemed to fold in on themselves, creating patterns that were almost artistic. This is emotional math, Marcus explained. Or that's what we're calling it. Traditional mathematics is binary, true or false, provable or unprovable. But what if mathematical truth exists on a spectrum? What if some statements are more true in certain contexts than others? That violates the fundamental principles of logic, Professor Zeltherix objected. Does it? Or does it just violate the assumptions we've built logic on? Think about quantum mechanics, particles exist in superposition until observed. They're in multiple states simultaneously. What if mathematical truth works the same way? What if some equations are simultaneously true and false until you choose which frame of reference to observe them from? Vexthalon leaned forward, his 4 eyes focusing intently on the equations. Show us how it solves the paradox. What followed was the most remarkable presentation in Institute history. Marcus demonstrated that the Corlax paradox only existed if you assumed mathematics was absolute. Once you allowed for contextual mathematical truth, math that changed based on the observer's reference frame, the paradox disappeared. More than that, his solution explained why FTL travel worked. The universe didn't follow one set of mathematical rules. It followed different rules in different contexts, and intelligent beings navigated between these contextual frames without realizing it. This is revolutionary, Vexthalon breathed. This changes everything we thought we knew about theoretical physics. It changes more than that, Marcus said. It means we've been doing science with one hand tied behind our backs. We've been so focused on precision and logic that we forgot about intuition and creativity. Both matter. Both are necessary. The resistance. Not everyone was convinced. A faction of traditional professors, led by the ancient Corthian master Zexthal, condemned Marcus's work as artistic nonsense masquerading as science. You're teaching our students to guess instead of calculate, Zexthal accused during a heated faculty meeting. You're replacing rigorous methodology with human emotionalism. I'm teaching them to think flexibly, Marcus countered. Yes, sometimes intuition leads to guesses. But those guesses can be tested rigorously. The scientific method doesn't require rigid thinking, it requires honest testing. Human science is chaotic and undisciplined. Human science put us in space in 3 centuries. How long did it take your species? 1,200 years, Zexthal admitted. But we did it correctly. Did you? Or did you just do it slowly because you were afraid to make mistakes? The debate raged for weeks. The institute faculty split into 2 camps, traditionalists who wanted Marcus expelled and reformers who saw value in human methods. Student opinion was easier to gauge. Overwhelmingly, they supported Marcus. For the first time in millennia, students were excited about learning. Professor Vex Thalen found himself in an unexpected position, defending the human he'd initially tried to exclude. Master Vex Thalen said during one particularly heated meeting. I reviewed Dr. Webb's solution to the Corlax paradox personally. I verified every step. The mathematics is sound, even if the methodology is unconventional. Methodology matters, Vex Thalen insisted. If we abandon our principles, we abandon what makes us scientists. No, Vex Thalen said firmly. If we abandon curiosity and innovation because they make us uncomfortable, we abandon what makes us scientists. Science is about discovering truth, not protecting tradition. The words surprised Vex Thalen as much as anyone else. 6 months ago, he would have agreed with Vex Thalen completely. But watching Marcus work, seeing students engaged and excited, witnessing genuine breakthroughs in fields that had stagnated for centuries, it had changed his perspective. The transformation. The Institute's governing council made their decision 3 weeks later. Marcus Webb would be offered a permanent position as Professor of Innovative Methodologies. More significantly, the Institute would reform its curriculum to incorporate human approaches alongside traditional methods. We're not abandoning rigorous science, Council Chair Administrator Veltrix explained in her announcement. We're acknowledging that rigorous science can be conducted through multiple approaches. Precision and creativity, logic and intuition, these need not be opposites. The changes were dramatic. Within a year, the Institute had established the Department of Creative Sciences. Seminars in artistic mathematics and intuitive physics became popular electives. Students were encouraged to pursue interdisciplinary research, combining fields that had traditionally been kept separate. Most importantly, admission standards changed. Human applications were no longer automatically rejected. Neither were applications from other species whose approaches differed from traditional methods. Professor Vex Thalen personally contacted Dr. Maya Patel, the applicant whose creative astrophysics he'd dismissed 2 years earlier. Dr. Patel, he said during their video call. I owe you an apology. I rejected your application because I didn't understand it. I'd like to offer you admission now, along with a research grant to develop your theories about thinking dark matter. Maya smiled. Dark matter that dreams? You understand that's a metaphor, right? I'm not literally claiming dark matter has consciousness. I know, Vex Thalen said. But metaphors can lead to insights that literal thinking cannot. I'm beginning to understand that now. The legacy. 5 years after Marcus Webb arrived, the Galactic Institute had been transformed. It was louder, messier, more chaotic than it had been in 3,000 years. It was also more innovative than ever. Breakthroughs that would have taken decades under the old system happened in months. Students who would have been rejected for being too creative or unconventional were now the Institute's stars. The rigid separation between disciplines dissolved as researchers learned that the most interesting questions existed at the intersections. Ambassador Sarah Kim visited Marcus in his office, which still looked more like an artist's studio than a scientist's workspace. You did it, she said. You changed the most rigid institution in the galaxy. Marcus shrugged. I just taught them what humans figured out a long time ago, that the universe is too complex for any one way of thinking to capture. You need logic and creativity, precision and intuition, seriousness and playfulness. Science works best when it embraces all approaches, not just one. Not everyone agrees. There's a rival institute being established by the traditionalists. That's fine. Competition is healthy. And honestly, traditional methods are valuable, I never said they weren't. The problem was exclusivity, thinking there's only one correct way to pursue knowledge. Sarah looked out the window at students from dozens of species collaborating on projects that combined art and science, mathematics and music, logic and imagination. What happens now? Where does the Institute go from here? Marcus grinned. That's the beautiful thing about embracing creativity, I have no idea. And that's exactly how science should be. Not a predetermined path, but an adventure into the unknown. The final lesson. On the anniversary of Marcus's first year at the Institute, Professor Vex Thalen gave a speech to incoming students. His words were broadcast across the galaxy, and they marked a fundamental shift in how advanced civilizations thought about knowledge. For 3,000 years, Vex Thalen began, this institute pursued what we called serious science. We believed that knowledge required rigidity, that discovery demanded discipline, that innovation meant careful incremental progress. We were wrong. He paused, letting that admission sink in. A Kirill professor admitting error was itself revolutionary. We weren't wrong about the value of precision, logic, or rigorous methodology. These remain essential. We were wrong about exclusivity. We told ourselves there was one correct way to think, one proper approach to science. We rejected anything that didn't fit our narrow definition of serious scholarship. Then humanity arrived. A young species with chaotic methods and creative approaches that violated everything we thought we knew about proper science. And in 70 years, they achieved breakthroughs we hadn't managed in millennia. This taught us a vital lesson: the universe is too vast, too complex, too strange to be captured by any single methodology. Different approaches reveal different truths. Logic and creativity aren't opposites, they're complementary ways of understanding reality. So today, as you begin your studies, I encourage you to be serious scientists. But I also encourage you to play, to experiment, to make wild guesses and test them rigorously. Be precise when precision matters. Be creative when creativity opens new doors. Above all, never believe anyone who tells you there's only one correct way to think. The universe doesn't limit itself to one approach. Neither should we. The students erupted in applause, enthusiastic, emotional, undisciplined applause that would have horrified the Institute of 5 years ago. But Professor Vex Thalen smiled. Sometimes the most important scientific breakthrough isn't a new discovery. Sometimes it's learning to see knowledge itself in a completely new way. And that lesson, more than any specific theory or equation, was the true gift humanity had given the galaxy.